This is a presentation on the recent Title V revisions to distance education. There have been some important things that we need to now handle by law, where we might have handled them just casually before, but there's certain things you may or may not be doing that are now part of the Title V law that we are supposed to be following. And this will be a part of our accreditation, so it's something you want to make sure that you pay some attention to. So just very quickly, I'm going to go through where the statutes are. Let's just step down. So if anybody really cares, it's, in Title V, Division 6, Chapter 6, Subchapter 3, and then you get into Article 1 on distance education, and that's where all these statutes are found. And digging into that, these are the applicable statutes if you happen to look online, the 55200 through 55210. These are the kinds of things that I'm going to talk about here, and hopefully in a way that makes sense to you and makes sense to what you're going to need to do. Let's move on. So, the basic definition and application of distance education, for us, it's mostly just our online training. It's any method really where we're separated by time and distance, but for us, we're Canvas users primarily, and that's going to be what's applicable here. But include in Canvas or whatever tool you might be using, a video or audio recordings or any other passive medium. Now remember that anything that we do that's sent electronically, an electronic document in any form, video, audio, text, what have you, it needs to be accessible to people with disabilities. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I've been sending out separate information on that as well. So here's the first one. So the Board of Governors approval basically says that we can explore and develop any educational initiatives using advanced communication technologies. Again, for us, mostly that's Canvas and what we produce in videos and that sort of thing, or podcasts, that sort of thing. But it doesn't restrict students' access by geographical, cultural, or even disability, and that relates to the accessibility component of this, or facility barriers. So they've also approved that it's interesting that they approve that we address the students' needs and preferences. So we do whatever we can in that regard, but there's nothing specific on that here. So moving on, there are three basic kinds of class offerings that can be done online that are recognized by this the statute and the academic senate for the state. And I just made a quick slide back up. I had skipped one. So let's start with the ones that the state recognizes are what they call fully online courses and these sections. So or really more accurate, fully online sections of a course. And for those ones, there must be no in-person meetings required whatsoever. No way, no how, no where. So we do have to have regular and effective online interaction. Now it says it takes place synchronously, which means at the same time, and we don't do a lot of that at Palomar, but asynchronously, where we use Canvas or some tool like that, and we don't meet at the same time, but we allow people to use threaded discussion boards and that sort of thing, or receive the materials online. So a fully online class is that. No in-person meetings, not even for tests or anything like that. So that's their definition. Moving on, a partially online section is also known as a hybrid here at Palomar College. And it involves anything that's regular effective online interaction for some portion of the approved contract hours. So we can do in-person aspect, and there's an online aspect to the class. So now here's the key. Any portion of the class that's delivered online has to follow a separate approval process, and we have that in Meta now, so you'll see that when you do curriculum work. And it also has to meet what they call the regular and effective contact regulation. And as I'm going to talk about a little later, that refers to both instructor to student interaction, and it also refers to student interaction. So the schedule of classes still has dates and times and locations where the person meets. So the key component here is that scheduled in-person meetings are at a definite time and place. Now, that's as far as uh, what Palomar College has now in its AP 4105 distance education procedure that's been approved. But there is another one recognized by the state that we do kind of as a part of partially online now. But let me tell you about it because it may become something that we do. So sorry, I skipped too many slides. Sorry about that. Here we are. I got to the slide that I want. They recognize another version called Online with Flexible In-Person Component, or OFI. It's kind of a mouthful. But that's the cases where an instructor says, hey, I don't want to have my student have an unproctored test. They can be here at Palomar College or they could be at some other testing center. It doesn't really matter. I just don't want them doing it at home. I'm concerned about cheating or what have you. And so I have a component where they need to show up somewhere and do a proctored uh, exam. That's the most likely scenario. It can be for other activities that where people meet and approve locations, plural, during a specified time, rather a specified range of time. It's not even has to be the same day necessarily. Now we don't have that explicitly at Palomar College. This recording is made February 23rd, 2020. So it might change over time as our distance education is revised. But right now, we pretty much just schedule fully online or hybrid classes. So if you have a component like this, you'll need to kind of schedule that in the partial online or hybrid scenario to get that to work out. All right, so moving on. Here, this is just examples of people who want to use this flexible in-person component. I mentioned the required exams. You might have like a kind of a field trip where everybody's taking an online class, but they have to go to a museum at a specific time as a part of the instruction hours, or there's a required lab at a particular campus or time. That sort of thing can be uh, can be part of this whole thing. But moving on. So there is, as always, this accessibility requirement. It's in Title V, it's in state law, it's in federal law, and many colleges have lost lawsuits or have either been sued and some have lost lawsuits of a fair amount of money if they don't attend to this systemically as a college. So all these little buzzwords like requirements of Section 508, all that really means is a federal regulation that specifies sort of a minimum floor level your documents need to be in as you begin an online class or a class that's partially online. There's a floor level of requirements that need to be met, whether or not anybody self-identifies as I'm being deaf or hearing issues or sight issues. These are things that will help out those people without them having to self-identify. The most obvious thing is captions on a video. And so there are ways to get your captions done for free here on videos, and then you put them on your website for your students, and they don't have to self-identify as being deaf. They can just see the captions. As it turns out, many people like looking at captions whether they're deaf or not, or whether they have hard of hearing. Sometimes it helps people follow along with the material. So you have an ancillary benefit. So we have to do this. Right now, in the current something called the OEI rubric, or more formally now the CVC OEI course design rubric, there is a section D that addresses accessibility. There's kind of a checklist of about 15 to 17 items that you need to look at, and they're all very straightforward stuff, but it's important to get familiar with that. Now, I just found out recently that Section D is going to go away as a separate section, but we have copies of it. They're going to take it and they're going to integrate the accessibility requirements into course design. That's nice for people trying to make their courses compliant with this rubric, but it's harder for people who need to check that you've met just the accessibility legal requirements. So you can always talk to the people and Academic Technology Resource Center or the distance education coordinator and get some help with that if you're trying to address that in your classes. Make sure that everything is working, but you need some help. Okay, so let's move on. So they do talk about course quality standards. Um, Now it says in one bullet, it says same standards of course quality applied to any portion of a class conducted through distance education as are applied to an in-person class. So what's interesting though is often people who aren't familiar with the debate between online and lecture training, and they say, well, why are you requiring me to do this for my online class? I don't have to do blank for my lecture class. And those debates went on for a number of years. Well, the federal government and the state government have basically settled the debate for us. They're saying online classes are different in key ways, and we're concerned about the quality of your classes, so we're going to set down some rules and regs and suggestions about what makes a quality online class, and we want you to pay attention to that. So they basically, the debate is over as far as the laws and regulations are concerned. So there was some judgment made with this requirement. That's just I got this from the state. This part I don't really care. If you want to look up the statute, you can do that. And so we also can make local course quality determinations in our own way if we decide to have certain criteria that go above and beyond what the state requires. Palomar College is free to adopt that. So, components for the official course outline of record, which is here we are in Meta, or we're in our Curricunet, Meta software, whatever we're using. There's certain um, course reviews that take place from time to time, and of course we have to do this with online classes as well. And during that review, with these courses that are offered or can be offered in distance education, we have to assure compliance with the Title V sections, and there's a separate course approval for saying this has been reviewed for the meeting those distance education components. It goes on. Again, you'll see that in Meta when you're dealing with that. Okay, moving on. So, instructor contact. Most of you are probably doing this at some level. You reach out to the student reaches out to you. But what they're really looking for, and this will be again an accreditation issue, regular, regular effective contact between instructor and students. And it doesn't say it right here, but there needs to be regular, effective instructor initiated contact. So you can do that, through a simple thing like an announcement every week of something related to the course material coming up, so they feel like there's some instructor presence. So again, this is part of the statute 55204. So one way or another, you could have group and individual meetings, orientation review, supplemental study. You can do all kinds of things that can make sense, or it can be as simple as an announcement done on a regular basis, usually weekly for something like that. Now, it is considered regular effective conduct is an academic and professional matter pursuant to some more regulations. So, anyway, I'm here to give you all this good information. Oops, I did it again. Passed too far. Let me. So here is the big surprise. The big surprise is you're now legally required to put into your courses regular and effective contact among your students, student to student interaction. It's required. Uh, it can vary how you do it, but you have to do it. Now the colleges define. They said they needed to define what's effective contact, and and there was a big grab bag of things we could have a list we could have chosen from. And the faculty senate basically approved just the whole list and just said any of that's good. So we'll hit a few of this in a minute. So about how often and how you do it, what manner, instructor to student interaction, and student to student interaction. And again, this is an accreditation issue, so we want to make sure that you can demonstrate that there's some effective student to student interaction, not just I've got a discussion board up there, yeah, they can use it if they want to. It needs to be built in a more formal way. So let's try to move on here. Okay, so that's just ready to reiterate instructor to student interaction. Each section, of course, has to be delivered, will include. Now notice that. Instructor initiated regular, effective, substantive interaction. What does that mean? It means pretty much what you want to mean, what you want it to mean. You know, you can integrate this in any way that you see fit. I mean, give it serious consideration. Make sure, someone would look at that and go, well, that's worthless. No, you want something that makes sense to you, that you can justify should the accreditation agency look at your class. Um, Individual meetings. So again, these are the suggestions. You can do individual meetings, workshops, telephone, voicemail. You can do all these things, study sessions, or you can, you can set up multiple ways through this. I set up regular discussions in my classes to do that and have contact between me and the students and the students. That's one way to achieve this. So here's the big thing again: student to student, ongoing, regular, and effective student to student contact. And like I mentioned, I kind of set something up every other week to make sure that I meet that. It is regular and effective. I ask questions that make sense. Usually they're open ended questions as opposed to questions specific about the material. I teach things very technical, so I don't have people solve particular problems in discussion, but they talk about things that were effective ways to solve those problems. So again, best practices. They're included, but they're not limited to assigning, monitoring weekly assignments, projects that promote collaboration. You can have group work. You can do all kinds of things to show that this is the case, that you're doing this. All right, now this is just the technical stuff again. This is about the back to Meta, that there's a separate course review. And so when you go into Meta, it should be changed shortly, where you'll see there'll actually be a place to have a separate course approval. Certainly the DE coordinator goes through and looks at this information that you filled out and gives that approval that way. So now, again, we kind of see that the colleges must define effective contact. So we pretty much just accepted the list that the state suggested. These are the things that could mean effective contact, and we said, fine, any one of those is fine by us. So okay, so we have a D addendum for each course must document the use of regular effective contact and be approved through the established curriculum process for us, the Meta. At a minimum, how course outcomes and regular effective contact between the instructor students will be achieved and how requirements of the American Disabilities Act will be met. So we have to talk about that in Meta and in that area. So there should be information about that. Another interesting thing has to deal with faculty selection and workload. So right now, it's been anything goes, but we've formalized it recently with the revision to the AP 4105 distance education procedure and with the most recent contract. So it says here the instructors of course sections shall be selected by the same procedures used to determine all instructional assignments. Yes, you have to be qualified in the same way, but the Part B says instructors of distance education shall be prepared to teach in a distance education delivery method. So how do we know that? Well, we've got three ways that are specified in AP 4105. And generally, you need to meet one of these three criteria. I shouldn't say generally. You need to meet one of three criteria. You need to have a degree or certificate from a recognized institution that specializes in online training. For instance, I have a master's in education that specializes in teaching adults online, so that counts. You need to have our local training, which is POET today. Now we're looking to replace POET or really revise POET with some information from @ONE, the online network of educators training that's maintained statewide. Or a new way is to use the OEI course design rubric and do a self-review of your class using that rubric. So if you've taught online before for a while and you feel pretty comfortable with it, that's probably your easiest way to get on what we call the Certified Online Instructors list. Just to go through that, most of you are probably doing 80% or more of what's on this course design rubric already. If you've got comfortable with online, sort of figured it out over the years, there's probably going to be very little that it suggests that you do more than that. But to go through and do a self-review will get you on this list. Now, the list itself needs to be used by department chairs before assigning an instructor to an online course. It's supposed to be everybody's supposed to be certified before teaching online from here on out. However, reality being what it is, we have a provision in there for the department chair should an emergency situation arise, and in short order, they need to find an instructor to teach an online course. So if they're satisfied that the person can do it effectively, they can assign them even if they're not on that list, but with the understanding that they'll go through one of those two things to get on the list. They'll either go through the poet training or they'll go through and do a self-evaluation against their online course using the OEI course design rubric. So these are now new rules that we need to follow. Okay, that's 19. Moving on. This kind of continues. The number of students assigned to any one section is pretty much determined by the district. Our latest contract pretty much says it's uh, the online class doesn't need to take more students than could fit in the physical class. And I think there's some other rules on that, but the last thing I heard was that. And it says nothing in this section shall be construed to impinge upon from any negotiation, anything we negotiate in our contract. So it doesn't supersede that. These are just the considerations. This last part, faculty selection, I kind of basically talked about that a little bit. Um, It says, in recognition of the unique and technical aspects of online education delivery, the districts and college should ensure that their policies and procedures support the need for instructor preparation. And we do. We have the POET training. We use the OEI rubric. We have support through the ATRC and the Distance Education Coordinator. So regular the training needs to prepare you for regular and effective contact with and among students. Needs to be equitable and culturally representative. Okay. LMS training and proficiency. Basically, you got to know how to use Canvas. And accessibility training, which we offer in spades. It's actually only about 4 hours worth of training if you take it all online. The workshops take a little bit longer, but you get help directly. And so ATRC offers a lot of workshops online and on campus. So do get that if you haven't, and make sure you take the best stab as you can and bring in your courses up to snuff in terms of accessibility. All right, let's move on. I think we're near the end. So when I give this in the classroom, I ask suggestions. So these are just some suggestions of things that you can use. Threaded discussions, group assignments and projects, peer review, student-to-student peer review, collaboration activities, these kinds of collaborative activities, and this can help out. So there it is in a nutshell. These are the kind of the new Title V, not recommendations, regulations of things that you need to follow. Remember, one of the key things is, and this is not obvious, all those components about student-student interaction and instructor-to-student action, if you have any portion of your class that's online, that stuff has to be in the online portion. Okay, you would think you could say, hey, we meet once a week, so that's where we have our discussions. No, you still got to have it in the online portion as well. And again, this is an accreditation issue. So do something regular, effective contact initiated by you and built into your class to ensure there is student-to-student interaction. All right, that's it. If you have any questions, call the ATRC or the Distance Educational Coordinator. And at the time of this recording, that's me, Steve Perry. And that's it.